Um, when you when you have an epiphany of some kind, or sometimes we call that the phenomenon of insight, something might happen. Just put that into your into the chat, and if any of you say something, you can have a bit of a chat around some of the things I'm going to be touching upon. It's very helpful if you do. The last 15 to 20 minutes or so, we'll have more of an open conversation around some of the areas that we're going to be focusing in on. So yeah, use the chat, and then if you do feel the urgent need to say something, which is absolutely fine too, just do the hand thing. So I get to see you, the little reaction bit. So otherwise, if you interrupt, it can get a bit messy. But do the hand thing if it's definitely something that needs to be addressed, or something that I'm saying, Philadelphia is in Afghanistan or something like that, then you can correct me. So that's about it. So let's have a moment to the greatness. Original sound of musician off. The Orphic Hymn to Aphrodite. For the International Women's Day, which is made to talk about the rights of women across the world. That's what it was set up to do. But there are few better poems than this one, written by Orpheus, the Hymn of Orpheus to Aphrodite. I can't see anything. I'm going to get my glasses. Aphrodite of the heavenly smile, many hymns praise you. Born from the sea foam, goddess of creation, you love all celebrations. You bring lovers together at night. Mother of necessity, your sway holds the world together. We honor you. You can repeat that. That can be a bit of a call and response. You create us all, everything in the sky, everything on the fruitful land, everything in the ocean deep. Wise friend of Bacchus, lover of festivities, fresh as a bride, mother of Eros, goddess persuasion, whose joy is love's bed, mysterious giver of grace, beautiful haired daughter of the starry heavens, bridal feast companion of the immortals, beloved lover, following by fawning wolves and cooing doves, giver of birth and life. Your love charms harness mortals with madness. You release the uncontrolled passions of every race of beasts. You are beautiful necessity, even in the frenzy of the shark. Delicate as sea foam of Cyprus, fragrant as Syrian oils, bright as golden chariots on Egyptian plains, by the sandy bank of the turquoise Nile, a choir of the loveliest nymphs sing a hymn to your beauty. Goddess of Cyprus, are you on Mount Olympus? Are you riding your swan-drawn chariot over the waves of the sea, joining the creatures of the deep in their dancing circles? Are you at the beach where your dark-faced nymphs frolic with light feet in the sand? Are you in Cyprus? Are you in Cyprus where they cherish you, as lovely virgins and chaste brides praise you all year long, singing of immortal Adonis? Hear these sacred words, beautiful goddess, and bless us. Dear Orpheus, yeah, he knew one of things about words, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. Lots of things like words and the meaning of things of words. So it would be really handy if you did have your notepad with you. Some of the things I'm going to be telling, it's good if you write them down and keep them to ruminate later. The general structure will be that we look into some of the mythic origins of letters. And I'm hoping I will give you something you haven't thought about before. We're going to get into that. And also we're going to go into some of the design understandings of letters and lines. We're also obviously going to speak to the phonemes, the sounds that things make. Phonemes is an interesting word. The sounds of pa and m and b, right? When they vibrate in your throat, this is one of the most ancient sounds you often heard when you were in your mother's womb, in the amniotic fluid. So as a baby, birth, baby, the B, right? As a baby, as we are born, just pay attention, constantly a B there, we come out, and the words that we often start to say is papa, papa, mama, or sometimes it's g, 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 because we are learning to use the spirit of our breath to work with our throat, the mechanisms of making sounds. And the first ones is usually the P and the M, pa and m. So that's where we get papa, mama, papa, mama. We know that. And that's the phonemes we're going to look into, and the examples of the gods that live among the consonants. Asemic writing, we'll do some exercises on that, breaking our language, breaking the bind of language, massive spell breaking. It's not something we might be capable of doing tonight, but that is an enormous hypnosis breaking, because we're all hypnotized by words. And then we'll do some practices of a galder. I'm hoping we'll have time for that. And potentially some other things, looking into some of the traditionally northern aspect to word magic. So that's the kind of general layout. We've got till about, we should be able to manage with the time we have. So, right, so the mythic origins first of all, and the very beginning that we need to go back into our investigation of letters as spirits, because that's really what we're investigating. I will try today or tonight to make you at least consider that the sounds of the consonants and the sounds of the vowels are gods and spirits. I will hope by the end of it that at least you will consider it. So the first thing, we need to go the deepest journey back in time, and the oldest texts we can find is the Rig Veda. That's the oldest text we have for our exploration. And it's good because it's one of the oldest texts we know. It's one of the oldest texts in the world. The Rig Veda and the Zoroastrian text both are the most ancient of texts. And in the Rig Veda, there is an indefinite being, an indefinable being, or the divine herself. And here the name is Prajapati. And often it means who. Prajapati means who, with a question. Who? Who? That's Prajapati. And Prajapati is a form of a created fire. And this fire, the gods could not look at. It terrified the gods. They could not stare into this fire, this divine origin. They could only come near it if they wrapped themselves around something of poetry or poetic meters. When they did that, they could approach this original fire. But if they stared at the fire directly, it will burn too hot. So they had to use a poetic meter in order to approach this divine fire. And everything that exists, according to the Rig Veda, everything that exists is suffused with two powers in the creation, which is the mind, Sanskrit's called manas, mind, and word. This is what interests us in our exploration. Word here means vak, V-A-C. Both mind and words are equal, like two equal horses. And the mind basically cannot exist without the vak, in a sense that the mind is harnessed and saddled like a horse through words. This is the essence of mantra singing. This is the essence of Galdr, which is runic singing, right? Is that the mind can be harnessed and saddled through phonemes, which is the sound of the word la, ra, sa, ma. Okay? Those kinds of syllables, those kinds of meanings, those kinds of sounds. The mind can start to be harnessed, and in mantra singing you repeat Namah Shivaya, Namah Shivaya, Namah Shivaya. You're repeating the mantra, you're harnessing the mind, and it rides towards what the mantra is trying to evoke and echo in the mind. This is the deep mystery of the yogis. So comparatively, it's the essence of rune magical practice. Ansus, Ansus, Ansus. The rune that points directly to the world of the gods. Repeating that again and again harnesses the mind to open that part. It's not a prayer as such, it's more a chant, a rhythmic chant. And in the rune system, we say it's the Galdr, to open the worlds and to harness part of our minds. And I will give you the origin text on how Odin, for example, the Allfather who hang on the tree of life, it's a very mysterious text. It's a beautiful text, this. It's how he manages to understand this idea. And when he did, what happened to him and what happened to his mind and what happened to his being. And it goes like this. And this is the mythic origin of how language was made. So Odin here, like many myths in the past, many gods, like the Egyptian god of Thoth, for example, and others, how they are language makers. Okay, it's It's something you see comparatively around the world very often. So here is Odin finding the runes, finding the sounds, understanding how it can harness the mind. And he says this: I know I hung on that windy tree, swung there for 9 long nights, wounded by my own blade, bloodied for Odin, myself an offering to myself, bound to that tree that no man knows whether the roots of it run, whither the roots of it run. None gave me bread, none gave me drink. Down to the deepest depths I peered, until I spied the runes. With a roaring cry I seized them up, then dizzy and fainting I fell. Well-being I won, and wisdom too. I grew and took joy in my growth. From a word to a word I was led to a word, from a deed to another deed. So this gives us a lot to reflect on. But here we see the same comparison that the Rig Veda is doing, that the word and the mind are both the same. And once he's peering into the runes, he's also then seeing himself and his own mind. And here we can ask a question. And there'll be a lot of questions, but I'll ask you a question. Imagine just for an instant, that you are reading a sentence, but you stop your urge to form an image. You stop your urge to form meaning. So you read a sentence, but you don't allow the consonants or the words, the letters, you don't allow them to make a light show out of it. You just read them as they are without making an image. I don't know if we can do that. Is it even possible? Write down the word cloud in front of you and look at it. Now, you hear the sound of it, you look at that word. What we end up doing is we're making it transparent, we're making it transient, and we go straight to the image. This is the thing that the words do in the mind. But when we digress, or when we stop the spell and we look at it as it is, what you are seeing there are sigils, magical sigils from the very, very origins of time. These are spells. But you often, or not many of us, have ever been educated to see it in this way, because our urge is always too strong. So the sound gods, or the letter gods that are shaping our world, right, harnessed through our breath, harnessed through the sound, we are not beings of an alphabet. We are living amongst the alphabet, amongst these entities, and we are just bringing out the sounds. So we are being driven here. So what we are having to do is look at the word cloud, but just see it for what it is. See if you can do that for a moment. So a writer called Buder said this: In truth, language does not reside in us, but we stand in language and speak out of it. So these sounds that are coming through us, these letters that are part of our world, on an everyday world, in order for us to perceive even the world, we stand amongst them and we speak out of it. And we wander the earth as instruments of these peculiar sound beings. A woman called Margaret Manus, who's written The Gods in the Consonants, she's wonderful, written a wonderful book. She calls them sound beings. Well, in this case, as a runic practitioner, when the runes have gods behind them, you can call them sound gods. And these sound gods harness our minds, and they are the organs, they are the very organs of our perception. So if there's one thing to remember of this session, is to understand that language is an organ of our perception. So these sound gods are giving us a way of seeing, a way of understanding blue, red, love, spacecraft. All these things they give us. The hymn to Aphrodite, the sound gods gave us. But what we have done and what we do in our minds only see the sentence, we only see the image behind the sentence. We never pause to reflect what is taking place when all these sounds bustle up together, bring themselves together, when suddenly we have the sounds of B, which symbolizes everything that is born. Why? Because when you say the word B, just do it in your mouth. B, B. It's an explosion that happens in the mouth. Can you feel that? B of the lips. Compare that to G, where it sits here, or a K. So when you have B, what kind of words do you think will be associated with this notion of B? When the lips are being held by the air and they have to penetrate out, bah, the explosive. You have everything to do with that which is then this growing. Birth, of course. Baby, bulge, breast, all of those words. I can give you many examples. But the easiest way is to look up the dictionary and see all the words that starts with B will become words associated with the kind of the archetype of birth. So birth is at its root. Let's see if I can just give you some more examples. It will come to me. Anyhow, so it's the same with something like T. T is another word where things are moving. So T is a letter of direction. So all the words that begin with T often is to do with traveling, going places. And for those of you who are interested in runes, when you look upon each individual rune, right, something like the G sound that Gifu makes is the sound of gifts. G is the sound also when you are retrieving your air, or you're withholding the air you are receiving with G. You're receiving something with Ba, you're breaking out in the mouth. With G and Ka, you're receiving it inwards. It's a receptivity. So Ka, of course, it's cave, cavernous, right? Whereas something like Ga is something, the grail, or something of that kind. I'll give you an example of ga. This is a very tested letter that you can see here. Hang on just for a second. So the consonant ga, so the rune for ga is gifu, okay? And it's centered around giving and getting, greed, generosity, all the ga. So there are two things, though, that can be described with ga. Too much where it doesn't belong, and the other is not enough where you need it. So, for example, the ga, which is to do with too much, is the gala. It's the galore. It's the glaring. It's the glut. It's the gob. It's the gross, right? Greed is the ga, Gascon and golem. Gluttony, gargle, glut, glutton, gobble, gorge, graze, grub, right? Grab, grabbing, grabble, grapple, grasp, gooey, all of these things. So what basically only you need to understand is that the phoneme, which is the sound of the word, gives it its meaning. And when the sound of the word gives it its meaning, there is a God behind that sound. Or this is a very tired word, but I'll say it. There is an archetype behind the sound. The sound of the snake, the S, the S. I mean, it's so filled with, you couldn't even start. First of all is the animal, the S, the S sound. It's the animal of the snake. But notice the words beginning with S, and notice how they're all associated in some far out way with the serpent. Well, let's see. Scale, skeleton, skin, skull, snout, sphincter, spine, cylinder, skinny, slender, slight, slim, straight, string, strip, stripe, scoot, scuffle, scurry, movement, skate, skid, skim, scrape, scrub, slip, goes on, swagger, sway, sweep, swerve, swim. All right. The whole of your dictionary will be an evocation to the serpent. Because underneath the S sound, so underneath that, you got soul, swami, sacred, spirit, sadhu, sergeant, sultan, super, supreme, self, sacred, sage, saint, samurai. All of them, underneath that, sa is the serpent. Can you see that? Can you start to? It doesn't take much imagination to draw the serpent and the way we say swagger, or the way we say satin, silk, right? So in the Garden of Eden, you get all the personalities there. Satan, right? Sinister, sleazy, the slay, sinister, savvy, subtle, all of these. So the sound here that we get for S, so the S rune, what stands deep, deep behind it is the serpent. And whatever that is, you can say it's an archetype, you can say it's a god. But in terms of its manipulation of the world, what has done more to our world than letters? Every book you've ever read, every sutra you've ever heard, every dharma you've ever heard spoken, everything that's been said has all been through the sound gods. Okay, so there is then the shape of letters as well. And what I'm going to do is that once we see how we are hypnotized by letters and hypnotized by this, how we are caught up in it, we're going to explore how we can free ourselves as well from this type of hypnosis, from this spell, which effectively it is, literally and metaphorically speaking. Okay. So for this, I'm going to share. I hope if you're on your phones, I hope you can see this, because I'm going to share something on my computer. So please, if this is as clear as mud, please put your questions and doubts and opinions and all of that into the chat, because that's really important. We can do that at the end, so we can, if you have questions surrounding all this, we'll. So in terms of the lines, you see, so all the letters, as we know, have very distinct shapes, and so do the runes. Every alphabet, of course, have these distinct shapes. So there are original thoughts actually around how these are designed, and I'm going to go over a few of them. But this is really something that I like you to understand the way we relate to certain shapes. And one of the first things is that the dot is often in Icelandic rune magic and in many other areas, the dot is a line that is not yet in motion. So what this means is that the dot is a line that is still, and often it can be depicted as the self. So it can be depicted as the writer or the person doing the craft in this case. So the dot is the self, and the line is a dot in motion. Okay, so when a line is drawn, the self is then moving to a certain destination, to a certain meaning, to a certain place. So as you do, for example, if you do a sigil, if you work on a shape, this is something to bear in mind. When you put your pen to paper, your self is present. But if you haven't drawn anything yet, it's often in the depiction of the dot. You'll see later why this is. Then, of course, the circle is different. The circle is the completion of something, the wholeness, the pledge. So what we get first is the ground and the horizontal line. And the horizontal line is often then, the correspondences with the horizontal line is the earth, safety, security. We all lived with a horizontal vision, right? It's the safety. If you're opening up a bank, 3 horizontal lines, it's probably your best logo you could ever have, okay? Now, what is the opposite to the horizon? And of course, that's the vertical, the heaven to earth. So the horizontal is the earth and the vertical is the heaven moving to earth. And that's when you get at the very ancient symbol of the cross. The cross is heaven and earth together, like that. If you ever want to hide from people, because our vision is constantly horizontal, we rarely look up the vertical. So hiding from someone's vision, you are always best to climb upwards, never hide on the horizontal vision. But the vertical and the vertical represents a much different feeling when you look at the vertical than if you look at the horizontal. Just see it. It's important to look at the horizontal line and then compare that feeling when you get the vertical line. It's a very different expression. This is, and then you have Paths, which are often written as in cave art and in many other ancient art, they are dots, but these are very similar to lines in a way that they are the self in motion. All right. And then you get things like rising and falling. So these are now diagonal shapes. And some of them rise and some of them fall. Okay. You'll see in a minute why this is an important thing to understand this type of design theory. Because as you look upon lines, you will notice that they will affect you in certain ways. And if you don't believe me, you can read up on the way that textless logos, for example, are affecting young people today, and how they are capable of being subliminal, which means that these lines, these textless shapes, are capable of entering into our deep unconscious and affecting us in the deep unconscious. Sadly, only to go shopping. That's the art of the marketeer, right? So anyhow, here we have the interaction, heaven and earth. And then you have other forms of lines, which are called chevrons. And some of them are north facing and south facing. So when they are north, they're south, they're open. And when they are they can be north facing, they can be closed. And then of course we have the kiss symbol of the two diagonals meeting, which is the first rune actually that we've now seen, which is the rune of Gifu, this rune of exchange, giving, and exchanging with the world. That's why the kiss has to be in balance. Can't be just, you cannot have an imbalanced kiss would mean that the diagonals will be in different shapes. So the kiss rune is often then the symbol of something deeply imbalanced between two forces. So here's the reason why we're doing this. So in Icelandic magic, they have this very much sussed out, right? So when you're looking at Icelandic sigils and runic shapes, all of them have these different qualities of working with energy. So the lines celebrate, the lines are in bloom in a sense. They are there calling in certain energies, and in others they're calling out, or they're pushing out. So pushing in, pushing out. And the first ones here is to draw energy inwards, which is the fork, right? But it's an angular fork. Then you have the second one, which blocks incoming energy. You have energy charging outwards, returning to source. And when you look upon these lines, of course, these things can always be interchangeable. They can always be an exception to these rules. But when you start looking at energy flows, this and how it's distributed, you see this one, for example, is that the lines is the movement of a self, right? From the beginning. So the dot now is the self is creating movement and is represented by these lines. So energy flow is distributed. You would have the same, and you can do probably the same kind of discussion with Sanskrit letters. I'm sure you could find individual Sanskrit letters and see the way those lines and the way they are shaped. And you can probably do it as well with our own alphabet. You know, there's a reason why the B looks the way it looks when you think about birth and baby and breasts and beginning, and all of those things. The B, the Bjarka rune, in its source has the mother of the birch tree, the mother Frigga, right? So it's the goddess there that stands beneath the B in runic, in the Elder Futhark, Bjarka. energy flow and it's distributed. And then you have this one, which is spreading out energy. And then you have the T to sift out the unnecessary. Wow, okay. Ta, 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 ta. I mean, here you are literally drawing your breath and removing ta, ta, ta. The T also traveling to something, etc. And then you have amplifies and concentrates energy, the line with the 3 lines across. So all of this can be, we'll do an exercise on this. I just want you to get a vision to see this, so you are aware of it. But when you do this yourselves, that you can always break some of these rules. So here's magnify, stabilizing energy. So compare that, magnifying, stabilizing energy, compare that to drawing energy inwards. Can you start to see, once you can see it, you can start feeling how it communicates, how it speaks like a letter. To soften, to nullify energy, then energy sifted out to prevent energy coming in. So I'll have to give you, of course, I'm just going to stop sharing for a moment. I'll have to give you what it looks like in practice. So here is a life stave. Look at that. An Icelandic life stave. Just to give you to see the complexity of it. I'll give you something more sort of, hang on, I can't see, hang on, let me, well, you can look at that one. This is taking this idea into higher dimensions. This is the witch ride stave. The witch ride stave. Okay, let's see if it's not too gruesome. Some of these staves can be rather gruesome. Right. Yeah, I would not read that one for you. That one would just be a bit too shocking. This is a bit of a grimoire from many hundreds of years ago. So here's others. So what this implies, right, is that the Icelandic magicians, they understood that it wasn't just the image that was powerful that a letter gave you. It was the lines themselves that were powerful. That was the body of the thing. Of course, our modern minds will wonder what that is, but hang on. You can't deny the very physicality of those lines, are the one that is the engine that gives you the image, that gives you the meaning, that gives you the sutras, that gives you the Quran, that gives you the Bibles, that gives you every single university course in the world since the beginning of time, right? These are the forces of those lines. So when we explore this, we can do an exercise in that you can, I'll show you how, I'll share something again. So you can do, this is a typical example of it's something I've drawn, but this represents life initiations or life events and things that happen in my life, right? So if you see a dot here, it would represent some of the steps that I've made. Okay. And this will be, I call this a kind of a runic tree. And I've done this sometimes to people. They give me the information of some of their difficulties or things they've gone through in life. And it usually starts with a dot. In this case, the dot's further up here. But this is something then that you move out towards the crown. So you move from the roots and you move towards the crown. And these will then have representations of certain events, certain energies, certain things that happen. And they can be called out to become chants. So you can start to chant, you can, these here you have, for example, for those of you who know, these are the runes of Fehu and Ur. So a lot of runes are in here, and you can learn to chant the sort of the walk in your life, but also you learn to start chanting some of the things you've gone through, and they become part of your deep memory, part of your expression. And when you chant something like this, it constellates all sorts of things. So many things can be put into this. So what I'd like you to do as a first practical exercise is do a sigil of your own life, just using lines, and use a dot, and do it a bit like a light-hearted exercise. Don't worry. Do it as a light-hearted exercise where you just use this structure that is, you start from the bottom and you grow it out like a tree. Don't worry about whether it looks good or bad, but just start to work how you would describe your birth. Okay, so you could imagine there can be a dot inside a triangle, there can be a dot inside a circle, and then your mother, would that be a sheltering chevron that protects from the rain? And then you can move up. When you left university, is that a split moment when two lines separate? And then the lines come back together again when you met your beloved? Marriage, how would that look like? But do it always with an abstraction in mind. Never do it in a sort of pictorial sense. Do it with an abstraction in mind, and just do it with a light of heart. So don't think too much around it, but just start making shapes. And as you're doing it, give it some sound. Give it some sound. See if you can make a sound out of some of the things and the lines that you're drawing. And if a sound starts to appear, there's not melodic, that's not what I'm talking about. It's more like a chant. Start to make a sound. Use a vowel to bring two consonants together. Lam, Ram, Sam, for example, right? And in fact, those are often sounds made to activate chakras. That's what the yogis sing. But create out of these shapes, start to see if you can create some kind of chant, and just do it for the next sort of couple of minutes, and see how you get on, and have a bit of a break. Maybe it's almost an hour we've been on, so just take the next 5 minutes to draw this, have a drink, and sit and just play with this idea. Okay, I found something for you too from this idea of the bee with its high pressure, as it's a bit of an Aphrodite kind of theme this evening. But Margaret Magnus, she writes, B is also high pressure within and low pressure without, like a bubble on the surface of the sea waiting to burst. English perceives this in various ways, as a birth, a death, a barrier, a transgression. Whatever the interpretation, B conveys an explosive, large, and uproarious experience to the word. It blocks any opening or process until the pressure is too great, and then it blows up. Bam! It dispenses in all directions and cares not a whit where it lands. So the verbs of existence is to be in English, and they are viewed as barrier broken, which means the original separation from one into two exists. Exist itself means to stand outside, so we ask to be or not to be. It's rather amazing. Here's the book, by the way. I have used this book quite a lot, but for many reasons. But one of them is that she brings home this idea that the sound carries meaning. And I've read through some of the chats. One of you asked, does it mean that it can be applied in all languages, right? And the referentials can be different. So, for example, the sound that the g in give, it's slightly different in the German geben. It's slight difference there. But according to linguists, yes, you can, if anyone's language has a word that uses the lips in the way that the b comes out, that would represent something in association with the archetype of birth. Okay, so yes, and that's not from me making this up, that's from the linguistics. And there is references on this as well, if you would like to receive that. There is many other, you can go further into this. But the exercise you've just done is a form of asemic writing, which means that you are writing something, but you are breaking yourself free of the sound gods that you have been conditioned by. You are now harnessed by something else. So as you are drawing the lines and finding sounds, you are creating your own language, that's why by doing it from your own life's perspective, these lines can start building up to have very deep, intimate meaning, because they come from the fresh water of your own wellspring. They are not given to you by the Latin alphabet or anything else. They're coming directly from your own well. So the creation of language like this is having a boom, another word for bee. It's having a boom across the world because cursive written languages are disappearing. In America, believe it or not, also here in Europe, and I'm sure in other places of the world, many young people cannot read cursive anymore. Handwritten letters are no longer readable for certain children because they never use them in schools, they're never exposed to them, and many of them cannot write in the cursive, they can only write through keyboards. So by doing this exercise, you're bringing in the true origin of language into your own well, your own resource. As you're drawing those lines, you're doing it in the shape of a tree. But the next exercise, or something to try, is that think of a title, invent a title, and just, or I can give you a title, or you can invent one, but let's say the cloud is passing through the sky. And when you have this title, instead of writing now in a kind of the cloud is passing in the sky, yes, those sigils, you know them very well. Try and write something completely asemic, which means it has no meaning in the semic form. Semic means a unit of meaning. All the clouds passes in the sky, if I was to write that, all of those words will have semic units of meaning. Immediately we all read them, we all understand them. But what I want you to do is to break this spell, to try and break it, and instead write something completely meaningless. Well, we can talk about the meaninglessness after, but try and write it. Maybe close your eyes, but you have to write it, which means this. Writing has a distinct definition. I'll give you one of the. Yes. So here's the thing. What is writing? Ultimately, it's not the sign, but much more paradoxally, it is the cursive of the discontinuous. What it means by discontinuous, it means that you have to repeat something. So what is repeated is discontinuous. It needs to be, it's a necessary, you have to stop, because if you don't stop, you start doing circles. So the language of what Marija Gimbutas found out in Lithuania with the goddess is that language had a lot of circular forms, a lot of spiral forms, because there they didn't have this awareness that words were progressive or symbols were progressive. So writing, you shift, you produce a sign, whatever line you decide to make, or well, if it's a circle, you have to put your hand on the surface, and to write, you need to advance. So you need to move to the right. For those of you who want to move to the left, that's fine. You can move up and down as well, like we've done with the tree. But just start writing, meaning that it has to progress. So it has to move from the present into something of a future possible. So the clouds passing in the sky, try and just make it asemic, right? So you write it without the shapes of letters, and move to the right. Move to the right. And if you do that, maybe continue, create a poem. So for those of you who can, just carry on, close your eyes and carry on writing asemically. Try and break the curse of, or break the spell of our conditioned mind, and just start writing something that represents the cloud is passing in the sky, but do it with your feeling of what that image brings you. So as you put your pen to paper, start drawing it with a feeling, but just make sure you go from left to right or right to left. You can also do below up and up below as well. But don't do it in a circle. Don't do it as it returns on itself. And I'll explain. So the idea that writing is a progress has influenced all our civilization's thinking. Our entire world at the moment is caught in this spell that everything has to progress on a line. And that's some of the spells of writing. Whereas in other civilizations in the past, things always went back on itself. But that's not what Roland Barthes, that's not what he means. Then you are breaking into drawing instead of writing. So that's the difference between drawing and writing. So try and do this, but do it in a writing form. So close your eyes and take a title and just start writing out what the title is, and see how you can discover something and see something. And whilst you're doing it, again, look for some sounds to what that could entail. whilst you're doing that, I show you some examples of this exercise that people have done. So you don't have to use, obviously, pen and paper. You can use seaweed, I think this was made out of, to express this idea of moving from the left to right. So this is a poem it's written in seaweed. Here's other shapes that they use. See if I can. It's a manuscript of nature, so here it's more like a tendrils. Now this is Alison Gray, which is Alex Gray's wife. I thought that's fascinating that she's an Asemic writer. And this is her language that she found through clearly going into her psychedelic journeys. Probably found on a spaceship or something, I imagine. And we have this as well, which is the Vedic manuscript, also Asemic writing. And then we have the writing in nature. Poetic. A friend of mine did a writing course, but his teacher was the ash tree, who taught him what writing was all about, who gave him the shapes and the different conjectures and the different forms, and he gave sounds to them, and suddenly he discovered that the ash tree has a beautiful language that it can convey, and it can convey meaning, and it speaks like all of nature speaks. This is again a kind of a conceited form of understanding that we are the only ones talking. When, if anyone, you go out in the spring day, there's nothing that's not expressing itself through sounds and words, and the same goes for trees and mountains and rivers. This is I did this is a wildflower language that I did from a field that I walked on every day, and these are the kind of the spirits of the wildflowers that were present in the field, and they have chants and songs, and you can see how they give you the quality of that dancing wildflower expression. They turned out to be very dancing type figures, which I didn't expect. And this is something I did from Marija Gimbuta's work, where I took some of the language of the bird goddess. And here, unfortunately, we don't know what these mean. Sadly, they've been lost, the real meaning, but of course you can use them as ways of journeying, ways of understanding what they mean through other ways. Now, there's only one we do know, which Marija found out, and that is the birth one. Looks this one here. This means pregnancy, actually, not birth, pregnancy. So that's the one that we know what it means as a unit of meaning. The rest is open-ended. We don't know what they're portraying. If you're interested in discovering things like this, it's a wonderful world to visualize these shapes. And as you do, one practice is through the unbidden image, which is that you can visualize the shapes in your mind's eye and you can walk through that shape. And when you do that as an action, you can see on the other side and wait. And if any images come up, so just like reading a word that you know, so you read the word house, right? And you see the house when you read the word. But here, you're a bit more lost, okay? Your mind isn't going to be harnessed right now by these. But it can be harnessed if you take 2 or 3 of them, or 1, bring them in as a visualization, give them a sound that intuitively feels, you know, something like a chevron pointing north feels quite forward, right? So maybe the sound is forward in your mouth. Give them a sound and then walk through that shape, stand on the other side of that shape in your mind's eye and look for an unbidden image that comes. So instead of having the image given to you, like you get with the house, here you have to wait for an unbidden image to arrive. And that is what's often called a kind of oracular techniques, where an unbidden image of a child with a bike arrives, something that surprises you, then you can use that unbidden image to give meaning to these shapes. So this could be the shape of the child, in this case of the child coming riding a bike, if that's the unbidden image that arrives. And what's interesting when you start working in this way, you start to deepen the associations, and out of it can grow meaning, or not just meaning, it can grow all kinds of what we say the phenomenon of insight can come out of this. So a symbolist is a bit like someone who doesn't, so instead of reading the Bible, if you are a Christian, let's say, you just put the cross in front of you. And all the teaching of everything that you ever need to know about Christianity is in those 2 lines. That's symbolism. That's what a magician does, right? Because in that, you have all that quality, all that vibration already enough in those 2 lines. So all the Kabbalists, for example, they do it. They put the lines of the Hebrew letters, and they look at them and they emanate just like the runes, and they emanate this phenomenon of insight, this phenomenon of meaning, bringing it back to the Rig Veda. They are there as beings that harnesses our minds, right? These letters. Someone, I think it was you, Laurie, who said, I think she's here somewhere with us, who mentioned that Steiner was, I never read this, but I know that Steiner was very deeply involved in this idea, which I didn't know. I will read what he has to convey. So did any of you have anything that you've done to show? I would love to see some designs. Anyone made anything, Serena?
Yeah, we've put them in the chat.
Oh, great.
But I don't know, my lighting's not very good.
I see some spider webs.
The cloud
Oh, yeah.
passing by. And this bottom line is the mountains move me where eagle flies.
Right.
So it's the different qualities. I thought it was really interesting.
So you can italize it, so you can make it more as you are working on those lines and shapes. You can make a sigil out of it by not it can freeze, but you put it you contain it, so you can add, you can restructure it, so it starts having more and more of a presence. Yeah, and any sounds that comes through when you were doing that?
But the sounds more were with this. This was the first exercise.
Yeah.
This was actually going back to last year when we were doing the Utaseta in the birchwood, and then I got this whole download about working with finding our soul song. So what
Oh
was
yeah.
the song that we were born into the world with? So I've kind of I work with the runes, and I've kind of got this first verse really, and so then I was experimenting. How do I turn that then into a sort of this sigil diagram that
Yeah.
has the sound of the runes in it, so I could then start to chant this just through the runes.
Exactly. And then you create a new sound god, right? You create a new spirit, which means that it drives you, so it gives you a thought construction. It's basically, it's if, as words are giving us thought constructions, this can give a thought construction that can be new and deeply insightful, which we may not realize at first, but when you do these exercises with intent, you might then say, I want a sound and a word in order to transform my fear into trust. Very, very simple kind of intent, right? If you do that, you are in the workings of something that is constructive of thinking, constructive of mind. But here's the difference. It's a good way of is that when it happens, when you speak it, okay, I'm going to try and do this. I'm going to speak now from my mind. So my voice is slightly changing. I'm going to speak about where it vibrates from up here, or I'm going to lower the letters and speak more from here, from maybe even from the heart. Maybe my heart speech becomes, it's stiller, it becomes more felt. And then I can even go further down towards the navel. That's when it becomes very interesting. That's when the speech and the voice originates from the beginning. So if you have this exercise, if you do this exercise and you find a sound and you found a shape and it produces an image that's very strong, like all words do, then use your capacity to bring the image from your mind down to the heart. And that's a long journey. Sometimes it's not an easy path. But bring that image down to the heart. And if you can, from the heart, bring it down to, it's called Megin in Old Norse. It's the place below the belly button. It's the Dantian in Chinese, because once the image resides down there and the shape and the sound, then it is part of the engine of your body, or the very core of your body. So if the image is a very healing, powerful image that can then be chanted and sung, then you should chant and sing it, not from here, not from the mind, not from here, but down further into the navel area. Again, this is mantra philosophy. So you bring out the galdr, or the sound that you're making from your fresh well, completely and utterly not contaminated by civilization one bit, just pure. the voice and the sound and the letter will be pure. It will be a new birth of a new letter and a new sound, which then can give new thought constructions and which can harness your mind if it's an intent, healing, well-being. I mean, you know, millions of myriads of things that you can intend it, obviously for blessings, not for any cursing. And that is the quality of asemic writing which is new, finding new voices, finding new words, finding new shapes, and working with them, because they will, especially if you relate them to your own life, they will feel fresh. They will be like fresh shoots that will be coming through. And in the Galdralag or the Galdra practice, sometimes you can actually use another force which is equally as powerful, is that you write a poem, but you can write a poem obviously with the Latin alphabet, the alphabet that we use today, but from the poem you can draw out the sounds of the alliteration of the poem. So you can draw out the bya ma ka out of the poem and just use the bya ma ka as the invocation of the poem. So the invocation I did with Aphrodite, I can look at that Orphic hymn and I can just take the sounds of the letters that is inside of that poem. So I can chant it and it would sound something like pa, ka, ma, or so, wa, jo, right? I will start to chant, but that means that the sounds will vibrate and they will do their work of drawing the essence out of the words and the meaning out of the words. So the meaning is bound through the phonemes, which means the meaning is bound through the sound the word makes, or the sound the letter makes. One little interesting detail: if you want to find out what the S really means, you can never find out. Why? It's because you have to use other letters to describe the meaning. And if you have to use other letters to describe the meaning of the S, the original meaning of the S is still hidden, because what you're describing is the meaning of the other letters. I hope this is clear. This is why it's deeply mysterious, and it leads us obviously into thoughts of emptiness, the emptiness of phenomenon, the emptiness of this light show that's underneath us. But by understanding that, we start to deconstruct our own bound, conditioned mind, and how it's been complete, how how the letters are totally in charge of it. The trouble is that letters are conflictual often and can cause harm and all sorts of things. So yeah, the sound gods, creating thought constructions, that's the main thing. So please use this opportunity, if you will, to explore and create new forms, new shapes, and new letters with the sound. If you haven't got the sound, you've only gone halfway. But once you have the sound, then the breath is harnessing. The breath is harnessing its force. And suddenly you can sing it out. And when you sing it out into the world, or chant it out, it becomes animated. It turns out into a living thing. I was thinking today, what would be a word for peace that comes from a new kind of wellspring, and what would that look like, and how can you bring that, should that sound come from a lake or a river or a rock or a tree and to capture it, to bring the sign, the letter back, and could it become a symbol that just represents a growing, peaceful, so these are the things that we can play around with in our mind's eye, how to give birth to new forces, new energies, new sound gods. This utilitarian, mechanic, mathematical, incessant writing that has to have minimalist meanings, it has to only be practical, has really caused havoc with our modern society and our minds. And this idea of progress lies deeply within the fact that we're writing towards something from left to right. And this is something that we can break. That's why I think writing from the bottom upwards with new letters, it has new potentialities, can cause new thoughts. Okay, let me go into your, let's just open up a bit of a conversation around all of this. So I'm looking at your, let's see what we've got here. Oh yeah, Yvonne, wow, look at that. Clouds passing in the sky. What a poem, Yvonne. What an incredible poem. And it's not pictorial. You can still sense that it's a writing style. It looks like Arabic almost, which is interesting because Arabic is clearly ripples in the desert from its very origin. Like our languages were some kind of, most people think, very much shaped by tracks. All right. Oh, wow, Alexandra, look at that. That's super Arabic. Oh, it is Tibetan. Okay, sorry. I thought you've just done that. Amazing. Yeah, how you would sound it. So when you write it out, one idea is to start to use your imagination of how this. So look upon the sounds as they are done as consonants. Hang on, someone's. I'm hearing echo in my. Okay. As the consonants move around your mouth, you can see how you can combine certain sounds to bring that into your new forms. So as you're writing your shapes, you can start to feel how that would sound. Okay, regarding the life tree. Right, really good question. So if you've had trauma in your life, can we do something to alchemize, transmute? Precisely. So with something like trauma, this is the best way to explain this is often the see trauma as a medusa. If you look at trauma too much in the face, it can paralyze you. It's something you really don't want to be doing, right? But this exercise allows you to reflect rather than stare into the trauma. And the reflection, the great story of that is obviously Theseus when he has to face Medusa. He has his shield that reflects Medusa's face. So he's not looking at her directly, he's looking at her from the reflection. And this is what Icelandic writing does, art does, painting does, is that it provides you with an element to see its reflection rather than staring at it straight. So that's what I would say about, but yeah. if you do a shape about something that is in your tree of life, pay attention to those areas, and you can go back to them. There's something that you can return to. But of course, it can be resolved. That's right. They can be seen from a reflective mind rather than from a mind gripped by it. Like, so that's what it's meant with the Medusa. Okay. What is it? What is the sound of the place in the land where we practice our work or libations, the place where we are in flow? Can we listen and turn that into a word or a chant? Yeah, exactly. That's a great idea. And not just a chant then, also a strong letter. A strong letter. A strong rune can be used for that. Yeah, the personal mantra. That's what they all are. They become very personal mantras, and they become very engaged. They have a meaning because you are not plucking them from thousands and thousands of year old traditions. They are new. So the references I've used. So here's one. God's in the Word. Everyone should get one copy if you're interested in this work. The next one is this one, Asemic, The Art of Writing, by Peter Schwenger, which is kind of the main. I find this is a very good one. And then for sigil work, we have the classic, which is the Sigil Witchery by Laura Zakroff. It's a fantastic book, actually. It's really good for making sigils. And there are millions of others. The one that shows you all the Icelandic shapes is this one, Sorcerer's Creed. And if I don't see you again, if you're off into all your adventures, I would say be very playful with the material and enjoy doing the work. Write those asemic poems, create new things, make new sounds, and see what phenomenon it brings, absorb what it is what would arise from it, what comes from it, what jolts you, what makes you come alive, what sort of effects they start to have. And yeah, some of us may share some of these signs and languages, and we create new ones. I have no doubt. Tolkien, he did that. And when Tolkien designed his languages, that's when he opened the portals to those worlds. He's the only author, the only fantasy author in the world that started by using runes and language that he invented. And that is how the worlds showed up. So the images and the profundity of his story making came from that act, that he started by doing asemic writing, effectively inventing his own understandings of certain sounds and words. And that's when the elves appeared, the hobbits, the beautiful landscapes and extraordinary stories that he then started to write. Okay. Thank you so much, all of you, to gather and explore this strange phenomenon that we've been dwelling into. And I'll leave you with the old traditional prayer. And I'll see you around. I'll write my email, actually, in case any of you want to harass and speak to me and want to do things. I'll send it here. There you go. All right. Okay, so these letters, these sound gods, are now going to be harnessed into this poem. Hail the day, hail the sons of day, hail the night and all her sisters. Look upon us here with friendly eyes and give us victory over our small things, our irritations, our judgments, our headaches. Hail the gods, hail the goddesses, and hail this fertile and green earth. Give us wisdom, give us eloquent speech, but most of all, give us healing hands for as long as we live.